Hello again guys, and welcome back to another Big Al Devlin video here at the House of Devlin. Thank you very much for tuning in, and today I'm going to try a very epic feat indeed. I am going to try and tell you the entire story of Ragnorok, the Viking apocalypse. It's a long story to tell, but it is a very enigmatic story, a very important story to tell. Because to the Vikings, this really was, and to the ancient Nordic peoples, this really was the sort of whole reason why they kind of lived their lives the way they did, or at least believed in the ways in which they lived their lives, because it gave meaning to their death and to their afterlife also. And so the story of Ragnarok is profound in its way that it affects ancient Nordic culture. Without it, the Vikings simply wouldn't be the Vikings. And so I tell you now, as best as I possibly can, the entire story of Ragnarok. So I hope you are sitting comfortably, because this is going to be a long one. I will try to make it as entertaining as possible, and I will try and include as much detail as possible, but there's always room for improvement. And so maybe in a year or two's time, I hope to retell the tale with even more meaning and understanding of the events that will occur during Ragnarok itself. But before we start with the actual what happened during Ragnarok, I need to first of all describe what it is for those of you who do not know what Ragnarok is. I mean, I know I have just described it as the Viking apocalypse, but regardless, I feel that that is giving it almost a sort of underwhelming description, and it's referencing it directly then also to like the Bible and the Christian beliefs, which would be wrong, because of course these belief systems are far older than that, and the idea of the end of the world is in pretty much every religion. This is in its own way its own unique view on how the world will end. Okay, so Ragnarok itself could be described exactly as the cataclysmic destruction of the cosmos and everything within it, even the gods. Now, chronologically speaking, and this is where things are very different regards the end of the world and everything. Chronologically speaking, Ragnarok is of course seen at being at the very end of, you know, all the Nordic tales and stories, but it's also at the beginning. And this is because when you are a pagan, if you truly understand the flow of time and the flow of life and the flows of fate, then you understand that everything is simply a cycle relying on each other. The driving force behind everything in Nordic belief systems is the flow of fate towards a single endpoint or a single destiny, which of course is a Ragnarok. But once that Ragnarok occurs and the end occurs, there is still less than room for a new beginning. And a beginning will occur, which of course is destined to have its own very end. Another Ragnarok, if you wish. Different to the first, but a Ragnarok nonetheless. And so there is, just like there is life and then death, and then possibly then an afterlife, so life again, life, death, and then life again, you see that within the cosmos itself, there is also life, death, life, death, life, death, or creation and destruction, creation and destruction. It's an ever-going, ongoing cycle. Okay, and to pagans that will make sense, and I hope I've described it in good enough terms for non-pagans to understand also. The actual meaning of the word Ragnarok comes from the old Norse term called Ragnarok. It's spelt slightly differently, but pronounced basically the same. And it can mean one of two things. It can mean either the fate of the gods, or it can mean the twilight of the gods. Either one is, of course, correct. And either one, of course, is a perfect description of what Ragnarok is, the fate of the gods. That all things must come to eventually to an end, so that new beginnings can occur. Now, when will Ragnarok occur? Well, it will be someday in the future, whenever the Norns themselves, the inscrutable spinners of fate, decree it to be. None know exactly when Ragnarok will be, and of course Ragnarok could be set to a certain date, but it could be slowed down or sped up through the actions of the gods and mortals alike. That is through the practice of Seder magic, where fate can be altered. But ultimately, destiny is destiny. Destiny is an unavoidable fate. You may possibly be able to slow it down or speed it up, as I say, but you cannot stop it. It's an inevitable fate that you must confront. And this is exactly what Ragnarok is. It's in the most unavoidable destiny that exists within the flows of all the different fates that are linked to both gods and mortals alike. And Ragnarok will begin with a great winter on Midgard. A winter unlike any other that the world has ever seen. The biting winds will blow snows from all directions. Huge blizzards will engulf buildings and people and cattle alike. And the warmth of the sun will fail. It will get colder and colder until the earth has plunged into such coldness that life simply can not exist in the same way that it used to. Death and destruction will take prevalence over that of any form of creation. This extreme winter will last for a total of 3 normal winters with no summers in between. And mankind, during such a time, as you can imagine, will become so desperate for food, which will of course be, will have gone because of failed crops, and other simple necessities of life, such as warmth, as I've once said, and water, which, okay, they might be able to get, but if fire fails because it's so cold that fire itself cannot even be lit, well, what happens? Mankind turns upon itself, and the laws and morals that were once there, the Uttengard, the Innengard, that rules over Midgard, will of course simply fall away, leaving only the very bare to struggle for survival. And it will become an age of swords and axes, where brothers will slay brothers, fathers will slay sons, and sons will slay fathers. And that will become ultimately the end of mankind. But it's not the end of Midgard. Midgard, of course, is a region or is a realm, and Midgard could also be seen as a region within the realm of Midgard. But we're going on to that onto another time. That is, of course, the body of Ymir. That's what I'm describing. But the wolves, Skull and Hati, which are the sons of the great beast Fenrir, they, since the beginning of the cosmos, have chased and hunted the sun and moon across the skies, always trying to catch them with an insatiable hunger. Of course, Skull and Hati, in my personal opinion, are not wolves, separate wolves of themselves, the sons of Fenrir. They are, instead of being the sons of Fenrir, they are simply shamanistic projections that represent their hatred and the spite which is literally what their names translate into, the hatred and spite that Fenrir has within him towards creation itself. And so, just like the Valkyrie and Memory and Thought, Hungi and Mungi, and Jerry and Freki, the two wolves of Odin, are all of them are shamanistic projections of Odin. Skull and Hati, spite and hate, are shamanistic projections, in my personal opinion, of Fenrir himself, and they represent truly his, as I say, spite and hatred of the world. But eventually, during, as I say, once men have turned upon one another during the Great Winter, Skull and Hati catch up with the sun and the moon, and they consume them completely. This, of course, in my opinion, gives them the power that Fenrir needs to overcome his bindings that the gods put upon him. The chain that holds him in place will snap, and Fenrir will be released and unbound. At this point, the stars will also then disappear, and there will be nothing but a black void into the heavens. Yggdrasil, the tree of life itself that holds the cosmos together, the very essence of our structural worlds essentially, will tremble, and all the trees and even the mountains will fall to the ground. Jormungand, one of the sons of Loki, just as Fenrir was, the great Midgard serpent that dwells at the bottom of the ocean, will rise once again and encircle the lands. He will rise from the depths, and in doing so will spill seas over earth as he makes landfall. Basically, there will be gigantic tsunamis spreading across the frozen lands that have now become Midgard. Now, all this commotion, all these convulsions, okay, it's much more than a commotion, these convulsions of the realms themselves, the convulsions within Yggdrasil itself, will shake the ship Naglfar, which means the nail ship, free from its moorings. This ship, which is made from the fingernails and the toenails of dead men and women, will sail easily now over the flooded earth, its crew being the dead of Helheim and Hel herself, and also an army of giants from Jotunheim. Essentially, all the forces of chaos and destruction. The captain of the ship will be none other than Loki himself, the trickster god, or as he would become now known as the traitor god, who himself, just in a similar manner to Fenrir, broke free of the chains that bound him for his punishments against the gods and mortals alike. Fenrir, with fire blazing from his eyes and nostrils, will run across the earth with his lower jaw on the ground and his upper jaw against the top of the sky, that being, of course, the skull of Ymir himself, and he will devour everything in his path. Jormungand, who's now reached the land of Midgard, will spray his venom and spit his venom all over the land, water, and the air alike, and of course upon the skull of Ymir, the sky. This combined assault upon the sky, or the dome that forms the sky, which, as I say, is the skull of Ymir, will crack the skull apart. And through this crack within the skull of Ymir, within the sky of Midgard, will emerge the fire giants of Muspelheim. It will give them entrance to the material realm. Their leader, of course, will be Surt himself, who will be wielding the sword that he had been forging for all of time, that will be flaming brighter than the sun itself once did before it was consumed. The giants of Muspelheim will then march across the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that connects Midgard to Asgard. As they do so, the bridge behind them will break as they take a step by step closer to the realm of Asgard. Heimdall, the sentinel, the ever-watching, most dutiful and loyal of gods, the divine sentry, blows his Gajauda horn, the horn that announces the arrival that the gods themselves, the Aesir and the Vanir, feared most, the arrival of Ragnorok at the gates and the edge, the borders of Asgard itself. Odin will at this point anxiously consult the head of Mimir, the wising of all beings, for counsel. And in their decision, the gods will decide to go to battle with the forces of destruction, even though each and every one of them knows the prophecies that have been foretold concerning the outcome, of course, of this great and final battle. They know all of them will die, but they arm themselves regardless and meet their enemies upon the battlefield, which we will call Vigrid, the plain where the battle surges. However, Odin does not fight alone. Of course, he will have his other gods, his sons, and the Vanir also. But he will also have his Einherjar, the host of the chosen human warriors, whom he had kept and trained in Valhalla just for this moment. Of course, accompanying Freya within the fortress of Asgard itself will be her own warriors, those who went to Folkvangir and its halls. However, at the battlefield of Vigrid, Odin, the gods, and their champions of men will fight more valiantly than anyone had ever fought before. But it simply will not be enough. Fenrir will swallow both Odin and all of his men. Then one of Odin's sons, Vidar, burning with rage at the sight of the death of his father and their armies, will charge the beast to avenge his father. Upon one of his feet there will be a boot that has been crafted for this very purpose. It has been made from the scraps of leather that every human shoemaker had ever discarded, and with it Vidar will hold open the monster's mouth, the Fenrir completely unable to overcome the magic within the boot, and then he will stab the beast with his sword through the wolf's throat, killing him. Fenrir is no more. Another wolf that preys upon the battlefield, slaying men by their thousands, will eventually, of course, come to confront the god Tyr. And in an epic battle, both Tyr and Garm will slay each other. Heimdall will then, find himself clashing with Loki, doing the same in an epic clash, each of the gods putting an end to each other's life. A final end to the trickster's treachery, but an end to one of the very best that the Aesir have to offer. The god Freyr, the brother of Freya, and the giant Surt will also confront one another and also end one another in their battle. And at the end, when all else is dead, Thor and Jormungand, age-old foes, will both finally have the chance to kill one another. No escape will be allowed for either or. Thor will of course succeed in felling the great snake with the blows from his mighty hammer Mjolnir. But during the fight, the serpent covered him with so much venom that as Thor stands victorious and valorous in his victory and walks away with his honor intact, he finds himself falling to his death after 9 paces, adding his blood to the already saturated soil of Vigrid. And then, at the end, when all gods and men have died, all giants and all forms of creation have perished, the world will sink into the sea, and there will be nothing left but the void. Creation and all that had occurred since will be completely undone, as if it had never happened. However, there are just but a few who survive all the destruction. How so? It's very, very, very unbelievable, but regardless, some life survived. Amongst them are the following: Vali, Balder, and Hoder, and 4 sons, and 2 of Thor's sons, Modi and Magni, will survive the downfall of the old world. Freya herself will also survive, along with a few of her men that she had recruited at Folkvangir. A man and woman on Midgard itself also survive. Their names will be known as Lif and Lifrazir, which translates to both life and the striving of life, or striving after life. They themselves remained hidden from the cataclysm in a place called the Wood of Hodrimir, and will now come out and populate or repopulate the lush land that they of course will find themselves in. A new son will be born, which is the daughter of the previous one. So the new son, which of course the new Astar. So I don't want you to be confused with son, S-O-N, and S-U-N. So the new son, S-U-N, will be born, which of course, as I say, will be the daughter of the previous son, and will rise above the sky, and all will be presided over by a new almighty ruler that will be unknown to us. My best guesses, of course, will be that it will be Freya, being the most senior of the gods that survived Ragnarok itself. And so that is the entire story of Ragnarok. It's simplified, and of course I haven't expanded upon the major classes that occur between the different gods, Thor and Jormungand, for example, which I have done a video on already before. Heimdall and Loki, Odin and Freya, Valdir and Freya, not Freya, sorry, Fenrir, my apologies. So Odin and Fenrir, and Valdir and Fenrir. These will all be tales and stories that I will tell at another time, if not already being told. However, I wished to just display them all together in one continuous story so that you can see what Ragnarok is. it really is the end of everything, but a new hope also at the same time. Life has a way of continuing, most of which, of course, that once lived will see a final end. And that's a simplistic way of putting it. There will be an end to everything, even the gods themselves. Even those who are in the afterlife will come to a final end point. It is only the very few that survive to re-enter the new world. And this is how the ancient Norse saw the world, and saw how the world would one day come to its finality. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. This is Big Al, and I'll see you soon.